All right, well, here we are with our first long format. We're going to do 30 minutes today. We've got Danny Wallace, Mason Hazel, and Vincent Schneider with us on this conversation. Each one of these guys work with me on a regular basis. And so we're really familiar with one another, but we're going to take a stab at three different topics that we've got today. We're going to discuss the coronavirus and how that is affecting colleges and how that's going to affect potentially our lives as we move forward. We're going to go through and get everybody's reaction to the last episode of The Last Dance, a very popular Michael Jordan show that has been on TV for the last month. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're just going to talk about what the best shows are on Netflix and what people are doing with their time. So let's get her started here. Danny, can you talk a little bit about how Corona is affecting both the institution that you work at and kind of what you anticipate moving forward as we start the fall?
Of course. First off, hello everyone. I'm Danny. I've worked at Queen's for a year and been here for 3 years. So Queen's has been my institution for the most recent past in my life. And I think this year has really shaken it up a bit with coronavirus being a major talking point from the new year. And coming from the European background, I've been looking how it's been affecting things over there, and it really took a hold early on in places like Italy. So it's been a crescendo in terms of the effect coming over here in the US. And for me, that meant no in-person classes for my master's program. It meant a bit of an adapted submission for topics like my capstone and different aspects of my degree like that. So it made things like really working towards my degree in research move more online and move much quicker and make it much more independent. So it shook it up that way, spent a lot more time at my computer and researching that way.
Now, Vince, you're also working towards your master's. Was it functional to move things online? I mean, what was that experience like for you?
It was unique because basically for 2 months we were in class. And then the last 2 months we were online. And like Danny, I had my capstone class, and it was supposed to be this big presentation to a client, and that obviously never happened. So at the end of the day, it was a PowerPoint presentation that we send over to them, which, I mean, it's not exactly what we worked for, and it wasn't now all this big deal that we were trying to make it to be, but just for me, it was definitely tougher to do things online in a class setting than it was obviously to be in class. I think it comes down to a little bit of what you prefer as a student. I've had one class where I sat in front of the computer the entire weekend, basically, because it was one of those weekend classes where we would meet in person. So that was kind of tough, just to, keep the attention level up for 3 days, basically. And then, I mean, just looking at grades or even just how much I'm taking from the class, it's just not on the same level as it would be in class. I'm sure, Danny, you feel the same way about that. Yeah, just tough, but I mean, at the same time, everybody had to go through this. So I'm kind of, it does make sense for me that Queens would offer the pass-fail option for all the classes. Just for me, it was a lot harder to keep up on work and even to stay motivated to do readings, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So as we move forward, we're looking at the future of what are colleges going to do, the really undesirable choices that people have to make. Are we going to open up? Are we going to be physically present on campus? You guys just want to go around. Mason, we'll start with you and just, what do you anticipate? Because I know you're considering working at a couple different institutions this next year, and they're all different, right? You've got privates, you've got publics, large, small schools. What do you anticipate the landscape looking like in the fall?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a few institutions. Some have mentioned cutting just portions of their athletic program so they could save money for the future, not cutting it for the long term, but just cutting it for the short term. So they could build it back up and add it in years later. I've heard that as an option. Some schools just want to plan like everything is going to be fine and people will, everyone will be back on campus. Everything will go smoothly during the fall. I've spoken to a few universities that are still being more optimistic than others. I think, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, there's a bit of optimism you have to have here because there is a chance that everything will be okay. And there's also a chance that everything won't be okay. So my understanding with just how I view things going is, my guess is that there's going to be a way where fall sports do happen, but I don't know what that scenario would look like, whether or not that means some people aren't allowed to come to campus, some are. I've heard that as a possibility for some California schools where, kids are doing online courses, but they're still able to have sports. I don't know. It's such a weird time in history to where, we've never experienced anything like this. Maybe something has happened like this in the past, but, as in this decade and this time, like we've never experienced anything like this. So, for me, there's so many options on the table and, the best way I can prepare, and I think the best way everyone is preparing, is to plan for every scenario. Plan like there isn't going to be fall sports. Plan like there is going to be that there won't be fall sports. So, I think the best thing you can do is just, react properly when decisions are made, and don't try to overreact.
The biggest question I think that I get from people, call it the elephant in the room, is college football going to happen? And what's it going to look like when it does happen?
Yeah.
And, Danny, why don't you just jump in on that?
Personally, I think
because you're both from Europe, so I don't know what you're.
Yeah, college football is huge, and I think it's bigger than almost any sport that I see in the UK. It's comparable with Premier League soccer, and I think knowing that everyone competes in it makes it difficult, because you have those really entertaining games between the Alabamas and the LSUs that will make revenue on TV regardless of whether there's spectators in the stadium. But then the smaller schools that sort of make up those conferences, they need the spectators. They don't get those big TV contracts as much as those schools. So if it goes forward, it has to be fair for everybody. You can't fund a football program if you're not getting gate fees,
That's a great question, though. Fairness, like the idea of fairness. Vince, you want to jump in on that? Is that something that's even possible?
Yeah, it's a good example because in Germany, the Bundesliga just started up last weekend. So there's no fans, and they play once a week. So there's a lot of criticism to that, obviously, but it's mostly done so that none of the soccer clubs go bankrupt, because they just can't go that long without any income. And like you said, Danny, there's no gate fees. It's all just TV money. And there's a way to distribute that in Germany where, not everybody gets the same, but it's kind of balanced out to where everybody gets to survive, right? I don't know if that, like you said, can be done for college football, because, some people just, some teams are just not. So is that money going to be distributed equally? Like it is now in Germany, or are there going to be programs left behind? It's a tough decision to make, obviously.
Well, and I would say, in the United States, there are distribution agreements based upon the TV deals that exist for all of the different sport leagues. The thing that I will say is that I think the burden is going to fall upon the mid-major schools, which, if you think about it, you have 3 different tiers within D1. You have Power 5, which they've got these major TV contracts. You've got the Group of 5, which have very mid-level contracts where, they're sharing somewhere between $2 and $10 million a year per member of the organization. And then you've got the bottom group, which is really made up of some of the FCS schools. And they don't really have TV deals. Maybe they get a distribution of $1 million per school. The ones that are probably the most susceptible to all of this, I think, are going to be that bottom tier of schools where they've got kind of large coaching contracts, and they may not survive it because their revenue from either their TV contracts or from their gate receipts it doesn't really match up. One of the things that I saw this last week was Eastern Washington had a group of professors that recommended that they Eastern Washington get rid of sports, go D3, and take the $20 million that they're spending on sports and spend it on academics. So that's one of the things that I think is a fair question. But moving into our next thing, I think there's pretty much nothing that anybody can tell us about how things are going to end up. We definitely know that uncertainty is going to be a certainty. All looking forward to that. Reactions to The Last Dance. Over the last month, we've had Michael Jordan. We've been able to follow along as you see the last season of him really in his prime with the Chicago Bulls. It's been exciting. It's been emotional. I've learned things about Steve Kerr. I had no idea his father was
Right. Yeah.
old. I had no idea the University of the United States of Beirut. But kick us off, Mason. I mean, you guys are a little bit younger, but how did that, I guess, change your perception of Michael Jordan? And what really stood about seeing him?
Right. For me, I've always thought LeBron, is the best player I've ever seen. I think that's how most young people are. I think they view what we view presently, and you view LeBron as being the best athlete you've ever seen. And I think they're such different players in how they approach the game. I think LeBron's so offensively dominant in how he distributes the ball. He has a very good IQ for the game, but it's funny because I used to think, well, he has it over Jordan, but then watching Jordan play, and when they talked about those 11 games that he started at point guard, and he averaged a triple-double, like 33 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists, and those were the only games he ever started as point guard. It's incredible to me. So, I think it definitely puts into perspective the different type of competitiveness there was back then, and how tough being great then was, because you had people like Charles Barkley and Karl Malone who, the 1997 MVP who just got destroyed by Jordan. And honestly, one of the things I took away from the documentary was a couple episodes back, I didn't realize how good Charles Barkley was. Like in that NBA Finals, like he balled. And so I think it's funny because when Draymond Green talks about how Charles Barkley doesn't deserve to sit at the table with Draymond, and I'm just like, bro, you do not understand how good this man was then.
Who in a world does a role player on a team get to talk smack to a former NBA MVP and
Right.
think he has any credence at all? Here's a question. Here's one thing I want you guys to do. Just if you're at home, you're playing along, go online, look up the career stats of John Stockton, and what you'll find is that the 2 years that Steve Nash won the MVP, his stats were worse than 5 different seasons that John Stockton had over his career. Points scored, assists, rebounds, steals. So literally you've got a guy who's on the same team as Karl Malone, averaging better than current NBA MVP stats with Steve Nash. And this is at a time when Kobe was in the league. So don't even get me started on people talking about how Kobe Bryant is better than Michael Jordan. And then the other thing for you to talk about is if Michael Jordan doesn't shoot 5,000 mid-range jumpers, does the guy average 45 points a game if he takes step-back threes like the Beard does?
Yeah, that's another thing that I saw is how different the game looked and how different it was approached, even from a coaching standpoint. Because you have, what's the Rockets coach's name?
Currently?
Yeah.
D'Antoni.
Right. Who's like, you either shoot a layup or you get to the free throw line or you shoot a three. That just did not exist, right? Talked about this in the office. I remember how much more viewable basketball was in the 90s or the early 2000s, right, than it is now, where the Rockets play the Hornets and it's basically unwatchable because all they do is chuck step-back threes. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah,
I watched the Game 7 between the Bulls and the Suns, and I watched guys catch the ball on the three-point line, take one dribble in, and shoot the longest two that you can shoot. What are you people doing? Danny, I mean, you're a soccer guy. Can you speak a little bit about your limited experience with the NBA and your thoughts on it?
Well, for me, I really enjoy the NBA because it's new to me, I guess. I think seeing the build up to the playoffs is just so exciting. And I think one thing I really struggled to get my head around was the sheer amount of games that these players have to play. But I guess with regards to the documentary, I really enjoy the fact with things like this, where you, as a novice in terms of the game, you really see these connections that you didn't see before. So, for example, with the Steve Kerr and just learning more about these legends that we know in Europe as just people looking in from the outside, but you just learn so much more about them and the role they play in such a huge organization. I think just seeing that and being able to see it compiled into such a digestible documentary just makes it far more entertaining for people like me.
Was it believable? So in every single story, right, you've got the hero or the heroine, and you have the villain. Was it believable? Was Jerry Krause a believable villain for you, Mason, as you went through and watched all this? The guy looks like Jabba the Hutt, all right. So it's already easy to probably bag on him in a little bit. But Mason, was this guy a believable villain?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you view it from an administrative standpoint, he's talking about it. He believes that the decisions he makes will win championships, and he doesn't really view it as the players winning championships. Like he doesn't value, paying Scotty or getting a Rodman, because he doesn't care about bringing the players. He just cares about winning championships. So it's interesting. I think that the best story that came out of this was when they were playing in the Olympics, and he was recruiting that player from Europe, and they were just like,
Tony Kukoc.
Yeah. It was a skinny white guy, and he's good. Like, he is very good. But basically, Krause was over there talking to him before, I think, and he left negotiations with Scotty because Scotty is supposed to sign a contract, but he left to go talk to this European player. So the American team just dominated him, and he scored like 4 points in that game. But yeah, I think he definitely is a believable villain in the way that, well, that's the thing. I also think Jordan's kind of a villain too, just because he plays that role.
That's what I was going to say too.
Yeah, he plays that role so well of, like, he wants to be the guy that he does not care if you don't like him, basically.
Yeah, Vince, you want to talk a little bit? I mean, how is Jordan? So you've got two villains. Do we have two villains? Is that really what I'm hearing here? Is that we've got the good and the bad?
I would say this, that the documentary did a pretty good job putting Jordan up a pedestal, right? Because there's this aspect to his personality that's just so different from everybody we have today, from a NBA stardom view, I would say, because there's obviously some stuff that's not that cool about his personality. And you had Steve Kerr saying there, well, he's kind of not that great of a guy, and we fought in practice because we disagreed on stuff, and Jordan just couldn't lose. And then there's stuff like, his MVP speech where he just couldn't even get himself to thank people and was just all about myself. I'm the greatest. I still think I should have won that MVP in '97. Like, nobody cares. You got 6 rings. But he still isn't able to really get over himself, right? And I think the documentary did a pretty good job with that. Could have gone a little further, in my opinion. But gambling addiction too, right? They looked at that too.
So let me ask you this, Danny. You didn't know Michael Jordan before? You don't know the NBA before? This is one of your more in-depth experiences. Did the interviews with Michael Jordan humanize him for you in a way? Did it show a vulnerable piece of a person whose persona throughout their entire time in the league was perfection, unstoppable?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we see is, well, my personal experience was I was aware of the Lakers and I was aware of LeBron. And then obviously Jordan as a a figurehead and a brand and a legend of the game. But when you see them really dissected in the form of media interviews and just broken down in sort of post that era, it does make you realize what they actually went through and what they really thought during those processes that you just don't consider when you're watching professional sports players. And I think it really speaks a high volume to what the current sports players go through. I think that was back when the interviews they had to face back then were a bit less compared to what they are now. I think interviews now go 4 or 5 hours in terms of the whole team and the whole organization. So I just can't imagine being berated by these reporters constantly. And I think he was a good example of that as one of the first people to go through that.
You, out of all of us, have got probably the most star power, if you will, within the sports world. When we go to places, there are people that are like, hey, is Danny Wallace here? You know, I'll bump into well, I mean, so at a very low level, what's that like to have people want to know about you and want to know what you're doing and hear what, you know, how you do stuff and what type of shoes do you wear? Just the constant, you know, can you take that and extrapolate that out to what Jordan must have felt? Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, there was an example that we went and raced down at USC down at, in Columbia, and I met one of just a freshman on another team who's in the same conference as us, and he spotted me from a way away and just came and spoke to me. And obviously I was a bit taken aback by it because I didn't realize I had anything interesting to say, but I guess it's nice. And I think like initially it feels good. You can help someone, you can give them advice, and it kind of makes me question, why do these people get angry when people just want advice and help? But I guess when it's over and over again and the same questions over and over again, you kind of think, just go look at another interview. You can find out that information elsewhere. But yeah, just constantly being questioned and thought about that as Jordan would have been. I just, can't even imagine it.
Yeah, you know, I think sports is one of the things that we're all craving right now. One of the things that I think I'm starting to pivot to are the new 30 for 30 episodes that are coming out, the great content that ESPN has continued to produce over the last couple of years. What are you guys moving to now that, you know, The Last Dance is over? The next thing I'm waiting for is the Lance Armstrong documentary. I want to hear what this guy has to say. My favorite quote, they're talking to him, Lance, after you face death, was it a difficult decision for you to take HGH? And I think what you're going to see is one of the we talk about selfishness, talk about Jordan being like so all about me. Just Lance Armstrong's response, just like, no, it wasn't hard at all for me to make that decision. I'm trying to win. What do you guys anticipate about those 30 for 30s that are coming out? And then what are the shows you're looking to watch?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that documentary a lot too. I mean, I would say cycling is a little bigger than the NBA in Germany. So I grew up watching a lot of that, like the Tour de France, and just hating Lance because he always beat our German guy. And then obviously eventually came out that they all use drugs, so it doesn't really matter. But just a feel for the personality that you usually don't get. See the guy just riding his bike around in France, you know. Really looking forward to that. And then obviously have on a Sunday night when you don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, Mason, what are you watching? Have you been watching any shows on Netflix?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I've been pretty busy, so I I haven't really had time to be watching Netflix. But I watched. I think most everybody watched Tiger King. I really enjoyed Tiger King. I think that there's two people in here, or no, just Vince said he didn't really get into it quite as easily. I'm really excited to see this Tiger versus Tiger and who is it? Tiger and Peyton versus
Yes.
Phil Mickelson
When is
and
that
Tom Brady.
on?
That's on Sunday,
on
I think.
Sunday. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm actually really excited to see that just because it's sports and I just feel
Yeah, and
so starved
Phil
of it.
said he promises there's going to be a lot of smack talk, so that should be a good time.
Oh,
Well,
I
I
hope
think
so.
Peyton is one of the kings of being able to smack talk. Just the interview with Tom Brady and Peyton
Oh,
Manning
sensational, yeah.
went so hard on him. I mean, Danny, did you get to catch that?
No, I didn't. No.
Oh, Vince, can you speak to it a little bit? Just the things that he was throwing out there. So good.
It's great, but I mean, they were on the same level. The stuff that Tom Brady said too, it's just sensational. Like, obviously, Peyton said that he's a cheater, all that stuff, and then I think it's great to also see Tiger kind of like the more human side of Tiger, and get to that level where he smack talks Phil, and Phil has the picture in the back of Tiger putting the green jacket on him. Pretty funny.
Danny, what have you been watching? What have you been doing with your time? Just talk to us a little bit about what's going to happen here in the next, couple of days for you.
Yeah, for me, this would be F1 season. So I think I really miss Formula One motor racing. And it was going to be an exciting season. There's a lot of change in that. And going on from Netflix, they had 2 documentary series of the past 2 seasons with regards to different drivers shifting manufacturers that they race with, and just having various levels of success. And I think I really enjoyed that because it just showed how much money and investment plays a role in just getting a driver into a team.
So let me ask you this, Danny. Did you watch the movie Ford versus Ferrari, where the United States triumphs over the Italians?
It's on my to-watch list.
Why, you haven't watched it?
No.
Vince, Mason, have either of you seen it?
I haven't seen it. It was one of those movies I was waiting to watch when I'm on a plane or something.
Yeah, you're going to watch it, Danny. I hate to break it to you, the Europeans lose to the inevitable.
As you would expect from a movie that's produced in the U.S.
Actually, you know what? I lied. The funny thing is that the Ford guy that's supposed to win, who's a British driver, loses on a technicality. So good, but I mean, and it's a really heartfelt story. I mean, if you like anything about cars, it's these people that are obsessed, completely driven by success in the car world, and it's really awesome. But we're wrapping up here. Thank you guys for the first long format call that we've ever had. We're going to be posting this weekly on the YouTube channel here. Danny Wallace, thank you again. Runner-up in the mile, stud runner for our team. Vince Schneider was a decathlete in college. He's an aficionado for the game of basketball. He'll be back here to share some of his views on one of the most famous German basketball players, Dirk Nowitzki, and the future of German basketball in the NBA. And finally, we've got Mason Hazel, who hails from the great state of South Carolina. He's going to be able to always come in and share his opinions on why South Carolina football sucks and why they're leading the way in more coronavirus infections. So
Wow.
for the call, and we will get with you next time. Thank you, guys. Have a great one.